our speaker today is Reverend Jen Dunfee, who is the chaplain at the National Presbyterian School. And she I met Jen first at the church she used to work at Clifton Presbyterian Church over in Northern Virginia. And I don't know, what was it, almost 10 years ago or something. She invited me to speak representing the Christian religion or something like that. And she had this unique arrangement of speakers speaking. We had Muslims, Hindus, Jews, Christians all together in one meeting over lunch with some delicious food from the Middle East, and it was a very large meeting, and I think it went pretty well. Everybody took a turn and shared something about their faith, their background. And I thought, ever since we did that, I thought, I would like to do that again. That was a great experience, and I'm still interested in doing that again. We may even try to do it here in Wrestler sometime. I think it was a remarkable experience.
The theme was on science and faith.
That's right. That's probably narrowed the focus a little more, right? Yeah, and so there was a Muslim doctor from Philadelphia they brought down and talked about his apologetics. It was a lot of interesting insights. So previously, Jen was assistant dean of students at the Madera School and associate pastor there at Clifton. And she serves on the National Capital Presbyterians Committee on the Preparation for Ministry, and previously served on the NPC Stewardship Committee. She earned her BA from Duke University with a double major in English and religion, and her MDiv from Yale. She and her husband are parents of two lovely kids, Katie and Thomas. 3. Oh, yeah.
Annabelle.
Okay. Annabelle. Katie in grade 4, Thomas in grade 2.
So actually, I think this is
that out of date?
last year I was supposed to speak and it got snowed out. So Katie is now in 5th. Thomas is in 3rd.
Third now.
And Annabelle's in kindergarten.
And in kindergarten now. Annabelle. Okay, great. Well, so Jen, I won't take any more time, but thank you very much for coming and enjoy sharing with us. Here's our sign-up sheet, please.
As we begin, we give thanks to the Word made flesh through Jesus Christ, and we think about how the Word joined with the Father and the Holy Spirit is what helps us tell our children that they are created in love and redeemed in grace and sustained through hope and faith. And so we think today about what it means to put words to children of some really difficult ideas and concepts, and we'll talk a little bit about theology and theory, but maybe a little bit more because it's more what I know about practice and what that looks like when we teach other religions to Christian children at NPS. That is what we do in our 5th grade year. We do a unit on Judaism, and then Christianity, and then Islam, taking sort of monotheistic religions and looking at how they can help us sharpen our own Christian faith by seeing what other traditions believe as well. I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. I want to think about that word teaching. What does it mean to teach children? What does it mean in the context of being a parent, a grandparent, of through this church supporting Christian parenting? What does that mean to teach? And so we can think a little bit about Jesus and his example of what teaching looks like. I love to give chapel talks to our faculty at the start of the year where I take a moment of Jesus teaching and we really break it down to see what it is that he does as a teacher. And of course we know that he is a storyteller. He tells stories that allow you to enter the story and figure out who would I be in the story, what choices would I have made, what have I learned about my faith and who God says I am through this story. We think about the kinds of questions that he asks. He is a masterful question asker. and knows just how to dig deep, to make people consider. And so we think about that in the life of a classroom, but even in the life of a Christian home as well, the role of asking really good questions. It has a lot to do with discussion and conversation to allow children to share what it is that they are thinking and feeling in the context of really big questions of faith and other religions and how this comes together. Jesus does it in his actions. I love the story where Jesus encounters the woman caught in adultery, and then they bring her out to the square, and at the point when he just kneels down and draws in the sand. Like, sometimes your best teaching happens through gesture, through action, and less through your words, but we know that Jesus also combines that kind of teaching with really powerful, direct language. And there is a role for that in your teaching, in your homes and in your classroom, a role for just very clear, here's what we believe, here's what we claim as a family, here's what we claim in the Christian tradition, being under the Reformed faith, making a balance of those very clear, direct statements as well. Jesus has ultimate authority, but he doesn't always use it. Perhaps he doesn't often use it. And I think that's a good role model for thinking about being a parent in a Christian home as well. So I want to begin with a little context. There we go. Okay. So this is just something to think about in terms of our context of where we live in D.C. and what it is that the children who come to 5th grade religious studies at NPS know about other religions. This is in the context of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I ask them a series of questions, and I have them stand up if their answer to this is yes. So I would like to do that with you all this morning. You can stand or you can raise your hand if you would answer yes to any of the following questions. Have you ever been in a synagogue or a temple? If so, okay, raise hands are fine. I make the kids stand, but movement is very important for small bodies. Okay, and then raise your hand if you know where a synagogue is. Have you been in a mosque or an Islamic center? Or do you know where one is? Have you been to a worship service in a language other than English? Have you been in a Christian worship place in another country? Have you been in a worship place for another religion in another country? Have you attended a service at NPC? I asked students this. I'm assuming that everyone in this room is going to give a big yes to that one. Have you toured the National Cathedral or at least been inside it? Okay. Do you know a neighbor of another faith? Do you have someone you would call a friend of another faith? And then I asked them, have you seen someone that wears an article of clothing that represents their faith? So it could be a yarmulke, a Sikh turban, a Muslim hijab. Okay.
What about jewelry?
Or jewelry. I think jewelry would be fine too. Raise your hand for that as well. So kind of like you all in this room, but maybe a little bit less. Our children are growing up in an urban, diverse, global city in Washington, D.C. And I always tell them that that's our context for this conversation. And if I were teaching the same class somewhere rural or where there was less religious diversity, it would be a whole different kind of beginning than what we have. So here's what I want you to think about. And I'm going to ask you that series of questions again. Think about when you were 10. How would you have answered this question? Think about where you lived. And I'm actually going to ask them again. I'm going to ask them again. All of them. I'll go a little faster. When you were 10, would you have said yes to these following questions? Been in a synagogue or a temple? Known where one was? Been in a mosque? Known where you could find one? Been to a worship service in a language other than English? Some of you might still say yes to that. Been in a Christian worship place in another country? Been in a worship place for another religion in another country? Maybe we'll skip NPC unless anyone grew up here. When you were 10? Okay. Been to the National Cathedral when you were 10? Maybe only DC people would have done that. Knew a neighbor of another faith when you were 10 years old. Okay. Had a friend of another faith when you were 10. And saw someone wearing clothing or jewelry that represents their faith, yarmulke, turban, hijab, something like that. Okay, so you see the difference, right, in how almost everybody raise their hands the first time through, and it was so much less than the second time through. But our students here in D.C. have their hands up because they've been to bar and bat mitzvahs, and they at least drive by the Islamic Center in Massachusetts if they haven't had an occasion to go in it. We will take them there in 5th grade, but if they haven't done it at the start of the year. They have friends and neighbors of other faiths. They've been growing up in this context. This is a conversation that they have been having since they are little. So some of you might remember when you first realized about religious diversity. Yes?
Even our own children probably, modern role now, could probably answer most of those questions, obviously.
Okay.
But they weren't raised the way I was. I did not raise them the way I was raised.
So,
or in the same place, because they were raised effectively here. And it's a different world than it was.
Okay, so even here, even if you were in the same place by a generation, there could be a different part now too. Yeah.
My help.
And I think when we think about teaching, one of the things to think about is how this works in families and how religious faith is passed down through families, and also how sometimes there's intentional changes. So you might not raise the children the way you were raised, or you might, or thinking a little bit about what sorts of messages, assumptions, faith passing down happened in your family helps you then clarify how it is that you might do that yourself. So I'm not sure how many people here would say that we were raised in a definitively Christian household. That can be defined in so many different ways, of course. But it is something to remember that as Paul mentioned, the associate pastor for youth and family ministry at a church for 5 years before this job, I always told people about the Barna studies and the other religious studies that showed that faith that is passed down and claimed by children as they grow into adulthood is statistically more likely to happen if it has been lived out in the home. And this makes sense, of course, because you drop a kid off for an hour, maybe 2 hours at NPC. We would have those families, maybe you don't have them here, who would drop the kids for Sunday school, go to breakfast, pick them up, and drive home. We're like, I at least need your cell phone number, so I know how I can reach you if your child needs you. But that happens sometimes, and I think parents are trying to fulfill an obligation of maybe religious upbringing, maybe they would call it moral upbringing, but if there is not sort of that lived practice within the home, then statistical odds are it doesn't get lived into. The Lord can do anything, right? But in statistical probability, it has proved to be a little less likely. So let's think a little bit then about the sorts of messages that you may have heard explicitly or implicitly growing up about other religions, and how we give those messages still to this day. On the left, I have a book that came out maybe 3 years ago. It was very controversial. It probably remains so when it came out. It's called Allah, A Christian Response by Miroslav Volf. He is a professor at Yale Divinity School. I had the amazing blessing of taking his theology class, systematic theology, from him. And he's in the evangelical tradition. He claims that for himself, but he, will write a book on Allah and trying to figure out how close the Christian God and Allah are. And he uses this expression that they are sufficiently similar. And then sort of talks about sufficient similarity is enough for really good conversation and dialogue, for trying to figure out what it is that we might claim in the name of God that seems very similar to our Muslim friends. And that book had a big response to it, both positive and negative, both within the evangelical community and without. I recommend it to you for your reading if you're interested in a little bit more about how a specifically Christian focus considers the religious viewpoint of another religion. That's explicit. I was also taking Greek from his wife, Judy, at the same time that I was at Divinity School, and they were building their family at that time. So let's see, that was about 10 years ago, and I was wondering, I'd like to email Miroslav and say, how has writing a book helped you in talking to your kids? Because when you have that ability yourself to really delve deep into what your beliefs are and how you share them, I imagine that makes really fruitful conversation within the home, because he knows and has considered where it is that he stands. The implicitly taught is this word tolerance, which had been for a while sort of popular in terms of school character programs and now have fallen out of favor because people realize that we can do better than tolerate each other, that there are other words to use other than tolerance. But there are implicit messages, and I want to share with you one that I did this week with my 8-year-old Thomas, who was in 3rd grade. And I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, but we were on our way to school, and we were listening to the news, and it had been after Donald Trump's town hall in New Hampshire, where the person raised his hand and said, what's wrong with America is Muslims, and then said Barack Obama is a Muslim. You may be familiar with this. And then, Donald Trump hadn't responded, and that's why it became the news. So my son, who appears to pay no attention to anything I want him to hear, perks up. And he's like, wait a minute, Mom. Barack Obama is a Muslim? And I say this. No, he's not. There's just something people have said about him. My statement was so full of implicit messages. And then I realized that, and I was like, I have to say more exactly, but that's a tricky one, right? Because if somebody's calling you a Muslim, it's not in a good way, right? And so I'm sort of trying to then backtrack into a conversation and say, well, here's why somebody would say this about him, but we have Muslim friends and neighbors. We live at the Madeira School, where it has a huge population of people from all over the different countries and things like that, and we see students who wear hijabs and other... Anyway, so I didn't do that well, as I attempted to sort of figure out after my implicit response how to then sort of say, well, here's really what I mean by that. But that's the kind of thing as a parent that you find yourself in all the time. And maybe the question is, how much do we allow our kids to listen to news radio?
That's right.
And that might actually be the response to the problem that I got myself in. But I'm trying to figure that out with my oldest kids being 8 and 10. To what extent I want them to understand what goes on in the world, but I also want to give them context and framework and safety in the midst of all that as well. It is a tricky thing to figure out. So I want you to think for a minute about the theological views of your own parents and what you were taught, and maybe perhaps what you have taught to children, or those of you who may then have another generation of grandchildren, what you see being taught to them. And is there a mix of explicit and implicit? Did any of you have some implicit messages as a child that you decided you did not want to pass on to another generation? Or maybe did you decide very intentionally that I do, that the way I learned about other religions growing up is something that I felt honored God and neighbor, and I therefore myself would like to share that as well. So just think a little bit about where you might have grown up in that. So I've sort of made here a little bit of a continuum for you to ask yourself, sort of where might I fall on this today versus where might I have grown up in terms of maybe even churches have different ways that they will think about other religions, and possibly how we determine where we fall on something like this depends on our focus. Are we thinking mostly about salvation? Are we thinking about living out our faith? Are we thinking about evangelism? Are we thinking about redemption and sanctification? Where are the places, maybe the role of Scripture in our lives and how we interpret Scripture? So I'm going to talk a little bit about these are small. So I'm going to start on the left. On the left is pluralism. And pluralism is sort of the many paths view towards salvation, that there are multiple, like if there's a mountain and we're trying to get to the top, and the top might be this concept of salvation, there are just different roads going up all over it. And I might be in the road of following Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, but I've got this one path I'm going on, and there are other people climbing the mountain on their own path, and we're all going to end up here. It's a bit universalist, right? We might say that it's sort of a universalism view. And many faithful Christians sort of have this. They might not totally own it, but this is somewhere within their theology. Then there's the Abraham monotheism only. So, we have Paul sort of claiming in Romans that all people who are Jewish have a branch, so they have salvation, and perhaps if Miroslav Volf is right, and there's a sufficiently similar God in Islam, that maybe if we just have these 3 religions that are kind of in the Abraham tradition, that we can draw a little narrower boundary, but there might be more than one path. This one in the middle is sort of, I know that the work and person of Jesus Christ is what matters for redemption, and I believe that, but I don't know how God does it. And I think there's some value in that, right? I mean, God is a God of freedom, and we know about verses, I am the way and the truth of the life, and we also know about verses, I have other sheep, not in the sheepfold. I will leave the 99 and go after the one. There is a breadth of Scripture to think about this and to try to know that Jesus Christ is my Lord, but God is free, and how do those two things go together? And this Christian inclusivism, these two are related, and this is sort of the salvation. It is the work of Jesus Christ. That is the only way that salvation is possible in this world. But not necessarily everybody needs to definitively espouse that for that work to happen in their lives. So this might be a little bit of the end of the C.S. Lewis, the last battle in the Narnia Chronicles. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but one of the enemy armies had this leader named Emeth who was following the god Tash, T-A-S-H, Tash, however you pronounce it, and ends up sort of being with Aslan on this other path and sort of says everything that you did for your God, who does not exist, honors the God who actually does exist because you lived it in such a way, basically kind of saying, like, you lived your life in such a way that a faithful person following the words of the disciple of Jesus Christ would live. And therefore, even though you never knew that these were the words to use for it, you are here with us in this next round. A little bit of that. And then the Christian exclusivism is, it is the revelation of God for salvation. It is a special revelation. And you also need to have been told that good news of the gospel and committed your life to it and claimed it in your life. And that is, I think, sort of the narrowest door over here. Now, and I know people on all of those, right? People in churches, people whose faith inspire me, faithful Christians who are over here. And I think it's just a little important to think to yourself as we're thinking about teaching children, where are we? Where do I want my children to be? Also, what is age appropriate for where my children will be? And that is really the big question when it comes to something like this. Okay, this is long, and this comes from something that Miroslav Volf had written prior to the book that I showed you. And I was going to let you read it, but the words are so tiny. I think I'm going to have to read it. I don't like to read long PowerPoints. I'm kind of against that in general, but I see no other path on this. Here we go. In my view, the Christian faith urges equal and universal respect. And it was not hard to find support in Christian classical texts for that view, which is now generally accepted. A surprisingly little-known segment of a verse in 1 Peter, an epistle dealing more thoroughly than any other biblical text with Christian relations to non-Christians, contains an explicit command to respect all people. It says simply and straightforwardly, honor everyone. I summarize the position in a post on my Facebook wall. 1 Peter says, honor everyone. Honor. Not merely, don't demean, or tolerate, but honor. And everyone. Not only those in our political camp or with our moral persuasions, but everyone. The reach of God's love is the scope of our respect. As the first is universal, the second must be as well. Similarly, since God loves all equally, we should respect all equally. So we talk in fifth grade about honoring. And what does it mean to honor? And does honor mean that, is it about knowing? Is it about kindness? Is it about my actions? Is it about something that changes me, but maybe in a good way? We really think about what that word honor means when it comes to other faiths. Well, we also know that this is true. One of the things we really try not to do is do that lowest common denominator. If we boil all of these religions down, we find this, right? And I think that does not serve anyone's faith, and it does not serve anyone's religion. So we are very careful to say that there are going to be places where there is fundamental disagreement in how we view the revelation of God, and that's okay. And then we have to figure out how do we sort of respect and learn in the midst of knowing that our truth claims are ultimately going to be incompatible. So I asked the fifth graders, why would we learn about other religions? Why would we do this at the National Presbyterian School? And this is some of the things that they said. If I visit other countries, I need to know, because people might be offended by you if you don't. Maybe to start a kind conversation with someone, it helps to know a bit about them. It is just interesting. To be respectful and to realize Christianity is not the only world religion. Someone who doesn't know about your religion might say something to make fun of you, and that feels bad. You know where the limit is for someone else, based on how you feel when someone makes fun of you. To learn what they believe in. So if you hear someone talking and they come over for dinner, you talk about their beliefs and you don't say, "That is so weird." And then it helps me figure out what I believe. Now I think that is appropriate for me to read to you because that is very kid language, right? I mean, that is how kids think. That is what they relate to. And there was a David Elkind in the 60s was doing research into the cognitive development of religious understanding. And he said that adults tend to believe that children are most alike in them and their thoughts and least alike in their feelings. But he found through studies the reverse to be true, that children were the most alike their parents in their feelings and the least alike in their ability to think things through. And said that really before you are 11 or 12, you cannot understand religious concepts as adults do. You're just not developmentally able to do so, but you will make meaning of these concepts in your own way, in your world, and often sort of through your emotional connection to them. And I think I see that lived out as sort of an aside of an example. You know, if I were to ask you to raise your hand, if you passed a person on the street who was asking for money, would you give them money? I bet some of you would say you would, and some of you would say you wouldn't. You would have really good reasons for not doing so, right? That I'm going to support organizations that help the homeless, that, studies have proven that it is not particularly well-serving for that individual. There are all kinds of things that you would say, but can you say that to an 8-year-old? And so I have found as I pass by somebody who's asking for money with my children that it upsets their world if I do not give that person money. Because they cannot understand a conversation. Well, I say, well, you never know what that person's going to do with that money, and actually it would be better if we support them. No, it doesn't work for a child. That may work when they are 13 or 15, but when they're 8, and they look at you and they say, why would you not give that person a dollar? And there's a little bit of that for me when I think about other religions, because it is a fundamental place you begin with children to tell them that they are uniquely created by the God who loves them unconditionally. And that I try my best as a parent to give them unconditional love that has nothing to do with merit or earning or any of those things, right? David Brooks in The Road to Character talks about how hard that is. We tend to sometimes live in more of a meritocracy as parents, he says, as much as we try to model unconditional love. So my children have heard me say all the time what it means to be loved by God, and that it is difficult to then sort of tell a 10-year-old, but, there are these other people here who, although God loves them, probably aren't going to have salvation the same way you do because their belief track is a different place. Right? There is a place for that conversation if that is what you want to own as a family. But with children, we begin as this love as an unconditional thing that God gives to every single person, whether or not they receive that grace of Jesus Christ in their lives. So this is sort of an age-appropriate thing. So this is what 5th graders sound like. So we sort of begin by saying, yes, God is going to love every single person in every religion we talk about. Now let's figure out what those differences are. And one other person, Westerhoff. John Westerhoff is somebody who's done a lot of writing in Christian education. And he has this beautiful image, and I wish I had a slide for this. That faith develops like the rings of a tree. And it grows out from there in complexity. But the initial rings stay. And the tree will be the same basic tree that it is as it grows out and out and out. So I like that this initial ring is the unconditional love of God. And as they go out and they learn what it means to have different truth claims that are incompatible, they're still going to have that at the center as they figure out the complexity that comes from Christian faith. I love that image. I think that's what we're trying to do in schools, at church, and in our families. And then the environment that that tree grows in is the family of faith and the family of the church that you are raising and thinking about those children in. Let's go back to some worries. On to 5th grade. Some kids have said to me in 5th grade that they're really nervous about this class. And some of them are nervous because they're worried about what their parents will think about what they are learning. And so I asked them to tell me a little bit about why you think this is. What are your worries about learning about another religion in terms of sort of what you and your family are talking about? And they said, some of our fears is, what if I find something that's more sensible and challenges me? What if I like another religion better? Sometimes they said, it just doesn't feel respectful to my family and what we talk about. Some say that I just don't want to learn about things other than what I've been taught. Others say if you believe in God and a different religion doesn't, you have to really think clearly about why you believe. I think that's a good reason to do it. And it might change your relationship with God. So, how can we then feel safe in a fifth grade classroom when we know that some people come in with that worry and maybe like a nervousness about even telling their parents about fifth grade religious studies? And then I liked what this one student said. She had written this down, and I asked her if I could save it and then sometimes use it in presentations. I try to do that when I quote a longer thing from a child. And here's what this one student said. I am not that scared because my family is Catholic. I am Catholic. I go to church every Sunday. No matter what I learn, I know I am still going to go to church every Sunday. I am still going to believe in God because my family is so set on it, and so am I. Okay? May the Lord let all of our children, grandchildren, and children we know in this church say that. I love that. There's an openness in it, but there's also an interest. There's a firm foundation of what my family has claimed and that this child feels herself. And she could stand on that, and she will go to church every Sunday, even as she's opening herself up to some different beliefs. I'll read this also. This sort of goes, it's a prayer that kind of reminds me a little bit of what this student said. Lord, thank you for my faith. Sustain it, strengthen it, deepen it. Never let it fail. Make it the power of my life so that in everything I do, you get the glory as the great giver. Amen. And then a reference to a kind of a paraphrased idea from Matthew 17:20. Church is important, but when it comes to the faith of our children, family is so important. And so we try to remember that it is family that frames and forms faith, but the way that family and church interact is that as families of faith, you come to a place where you worship and you do this work together. And hopefully some of you who are here who may have children, grandchildren in this congregation, or may not know some children in the church. When I was the associate pastor at Clifton, I always said that we want Sunday school teachers who are not parents. It is hard to teach a class when you are a parent in that same class. And a gift to this church is to have people come in and know children who aren't their parents. And I have cited another study that I think that great Barna group has done about how another marker of a faith that blossoms with adulthood is one or two other adults other than the parents who have a meaningful connection with a child that raise them up in faith. And your youth pastor can't do it all by himself. So we need a team to do this. Okay. Just some ideas. The more that we can talk and be explicit, trying to gauge the age appropriateness and interest of the children that we know, the better. Show your own wrestling with learning about other religions. Sometimes you just have to be honest and say, here's my hope, or here's the part of this that doesn't make sense. Here's what I really wonder about. Here's some scripture I'd like to read with you. Let's try to figure out what this might be saying. Talk about religious difference and how you can respect and honor while not believing the same things. My daughter's, my 10-year-old's next door neighbor is Jewish, and they want to have a sleepover, and they I love that they're trying to figure out how to do it, right? It's like, well, I got to get up early on Saturday. She's like, I got to get up early on Sunday. So they're trying to figure out how to have a sleepover, and they're learning just through that context of living out their little lives. To be bold in your beliefs, but be bolder in how you live them out. This is something that we know so much. As teachers at NPS, we talk a lot about what it means to have an organic community of love and learning at NPS, and that students see that in us. We could just sort of tell them all the time that we have these 5 core values, and we go to chapel and we talk about God and we learn about Jesus. But if they do not see that played out in our teaching and in the lives as they see us led in the school, then those words tend to fall short. And then the role of role play and scenarios. So I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to do this. My poor children, we role play and we do a lot of things that we do in school, and this is not an example about other faiths, but I'll give you an example about how we do this. I had served as the associate pastor at Clifton for 5.5 years, and then starting my 5th year at the school, so I've been gone for 4 years. And some of you know that when a pastor leaves in the Presbyterian tradition, it sort of cuts off contact, right? You don't want somebody to have a continuing pastoral relationship with somebody because you want them to build with a new person. It's confusing sometimes for the people with whom you have grown close. So after 4 years, our senior pastor went on sabbatical, and they asked me to come back and preach this summer, which I did. And I'm not sure if that's totally in line with rules, but it was fine. We all thought it was fine. But I realized for my children, who were 1, 4, and 6 when we left that church, that everybody who was there when I was there would know them and would know how in the middle of the baptism of her brother, my oldest child said, "I have to pee," and we had to like rearrange everything and get someone to take her to the bathroom. She also wore a bathing suit, like kind of over her clothes, for like 3 months in the summer. And people would know these things about her, and so we had them practice. That my husband and I would pretend to be somebody who came up to them and said, "I remember you when you were," and they had to like nod and smile and say, "Oh, thank you, it is so nice to see you," and "Oh, it's great to be back here." We made all 3 of them, even the 5-year-old, do this with us, so that they would have some experience as to what they might hear, and they heard it like 100 times, so it was good that we had a chance to do this. So there are ways to do this when your child, is going to role play, like my daughter's going to this friend's older sister's bat mitzvah next Saturday. She hasn't done that before. So we're going to sort of think through a little bit about, what she might find, what are some things she might say. She's a little worried that someone's going to know she's not Jewish. So we can sort of say, even practice, what if somebody says to you, "Are you Jewish?" She's allowed to answer that, but we're going to practice what she might say as a response to that. So, if you know that your child, if you had a 5th grader in NPS who was worried about this class, you could sort of say, let's talk about some of your worries. What are some things that you could say if you feel like you're in a hot spot in a conversation because you want to share something that our family believes that other people are saying something different? What does that feel like? And we'll kind of talk those things out. So I encourage you to think about that as well. So there is worship that happens as families and as a church. There is conversation, there is ritual and action, and all of those things sort of build together to be this framing faith of families and of churches that give kids both that conditional belief that God does love them, but they are able to feel safety enough to honor and respect other religions as they encounter them, and also to understand that it is okay that if we start here and we grow in complexity as we feel that they are ready. And I have a book, I just grabbed 2. One to suggest reading. This is called Sharing Faith with Children, Rethinking the Children's Sermon. And it is sort of made for pastors who are going to be doing children's sermon in churches, but there are chapters on religious faith development, on spiritual development by age group, on talking to children. The tree image is in here. There are some things in here that I think any parent would find helpful, and it's a small book, so this is an easy one to get through. And then if you are sort of thinking you want to just sort of focus in on your theology, this is one of my books from Dunfee School that I get out all the time. It's Shirley Guthrie's book on Christian doctrine. It's within the Reformed tradition. I love the way this book is written, and I find it accessible. And there are page 69 and 72 that talk about interreligious conversation and what it means to honor that God of freedom, while at the same time knowing special revelation for first the Jews and then those who live in Jesus Christ, but figuring out how we honor that, we claim that, we live that out, and we can still learn about other religions in a really faithful way as well. So that's all in here as well. I think that might be it. So thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
As a parent of teenagers,
Yes.
and actually high school now, I find it probably harder now to do the earlier ages because the questions are more used to the family kind of frames, it's like friends.
Yeah.
Frame a lot of that. So this environment, we have a lot of, when my kids go to school, they have a lot of faiths and friends of different faiths that are very devout in their faiths. And they ask questions like, well, if I were so-and-so and grew up in his house, I was probably Muslim. So to learn that, that's the truth for me. So how do I know that my faith is right, given that they think their faith is right, and they're good friends of mine? We do good things. They serve the poor. They do, and that's really hard discussion, right? So to have, and that, we fall more towards the right hand side of your continuum.
And I think when you're a teenager, you can delve deep into sort of what the differences are of faith through Jesus Christ, what it means to have a self-sacrificing God, a self-giving God. I mean, those are some of those strong differences. And you say it might be lived out in a way that looks very similar, but there's a fundamental difference in this truth claim. Then they'll say back to you, but it's only because I was born here and not next door. I mean, those details matter. And sort of the role of Jesus Christ and the difference he makes from Judaism and Islam, it's just something to keep saying. Jesus. Yes.
I was just going to share, I grew up in the Allentown Presbyterian Church in Pennsylvania, and I don't know what you do here with your confirmation class, but that whole year was about studying other faiths, our faith, the differences. We went to a mosque, we went to a synagogue, we went to the other churches. And at the end of the class, you could choose whether you wanted to be confirmed or not. And my dad always seemed to attract the ones that said no. I don't know why. He's a lovely, person of faith. But I thought that was really powerful in that it wasn't something forced upon you, and it was about discovering what you believe and why you believe it. So hopefully they do something like that here and really wrestle with those issues.
I mean, I'm sure parents would be very nervous to give your child the ability to claim or not claim, but we know that the work of God continues, even past the child saying, no. There is so much that has gone into getting to that moment that are seeds of faith. And so we just pray and, know that sort of the life of faith is long. Yes.
Well, first I just want to say I am an NPS parent here, and I have a 6th grader who had Jen's class last year, and let me just say, we are so lucky to have you. I mean, you are such a gift to this school and to this church, so please know that, everyone here. She is just a wonderful, wonderful addition. But I wanted to ask your advice. I understand in the context of the 5th grade class, obviously, you focus on the monotheistic religions, but we are even now with my child dealing with beyond that, and even the people who are, as I tell him, religiously atheists. And what do you do about that? The spiritualists, the people who are into sort of the new agey and all that. We know people who believe that is a religion, and I mean it really even goes beyond just the 3 religions you discussed. So I mean, do you have any comment even about that?
I mean, we spend time in 5th grade saying what a religion is. And at the beginning of class, kind of after we do that, raise your hands, stand up thing, we have them ask what kinds of questions you would need to find out to figure out if something is a religion. And the students, it's interesting because it could be because they're from NPS, but they all have, you have to worship something, you have to gather, there is a one God, what is the name of that God? So it is interesting to draw upon what students already think about religion because they have gone to this church and gone to NPS. Not that those other belief systems aren't religions, but to sort of explain the creating, redeeming, and sustaining language of God and what that means. And those are aspects that are pretty unique to the Christian faith. And you might even say, let's think about that. What might you be missing in terms of who you are and how you are claimed in that system versus ours? I think there's a way to sort of get them to say, one of the things about Christianity is we are created, we are redeemed, we are sustained and sanctified beyond that. And 6th grade, he can start, your son can start doing that.
Right, no, but it is.
And it is conversation, and it's helping them make meaning is the important thing. And there is a role, as I said, of the balance of saying, here is definitively the words to put in what we believe, but also what difference does our going to this church where we worship and we have these rituals of faith and practice and we say these things about Jesus make a difference in your life now?
Right.
And sort of try to get them to think about that a little bit. Yes.
Going back to your narrowing line across the screen, it seems to me there's a very heavy weight put upon the word honor, to honor somebody else's religion. And I think that takes a fair amount of parsing to see what one means by saying honor. Yes, respect, tolerate, agree with, question mark. So it seems to me when you use the word honor, it covers a multitude of concepts that needs, as you say, age appropriate, need to be parsed and broken apart into what we really mean by it. That's one comment. A different comment, I wish I could remember the name of the author. I have the book at home. It's called Without Buddhism, I Could Not Be a Good Christian. And it's written by a Catholic priest who has been asked why he remains a Catholic priest, believing as he does in looking at the various aspects of Christian doctrine and what Buddhists have to say about those same sets of issues, and finding his faith strengthened by the perspectives that are given from different religions. And then lastly, a book at home that I can't remember, Deepak Chopra. It's called The Third Jesus. I mean, you can have a bookshelf with Chopra's works. This is one of them. And what amazed me in looking through it was the depth of his knowledge about our religion in making a different kind of a case. But it was, I would say, a respectful case, a different case in the end, but a respectful case nonetheless.
Thank you. 2 more books to add to our book list. Let's get reading. Actually, this would be a great topic for like a book club discussion, to read some of these books and then to talk a little bit, to bring in the teenage perspective, which I didn't really address, but gets ever more complex and complicated. A worthy continued conversation for NPC, I think.
That's exactly right. You are a wonderful asset to the church as well as the school, and I guess you're enjoying your work with the children, but a lot of the things you're talking about here, I think we can all learn from, and so I hope we can get a better connection going, ongoing here, and the wrestler schedule for the spring is wide open.
Well, I mean, so I worked at a high school for 5 years, and then I served as a pastor. I mean, I was the leader of the youth group for 5 years. So if we wanted to take it up and do a teenage look, I would be game for that. So this is more sort of my elementary school world right now, but I would draw back in my memory upon those teenagers, and we could have a good conversation about that too.
Very good. Right. Well, for the last couple of years, I've been working downtown at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is the nation's largest science society. And we had a project called the Perceptions Project, in which we brought together a group of about 15 scientists from the local city and 15 pastors from local churches, and just kind of mix it up to see what would happen. We were not trying to resolve big questions, but we were trying to meet in a respectful way, and we had facilitators to guide a discussion through general questions about how should we interrelate with each other, and what are the options. Should we build bridges, find common ground? Should we just try to collaborate on practical projects? Or should we just try to stay separate so that we can maintain our integrity in our own spheres of work? So there's all different options. But it just got me thinking so deeply about these questions of building bridges, and what does that mean? Dialogue is the word that keeps coming back on this. And as you were saying, we learn from each other. We learn from the contrast and the diversity in the world. And when we start out, we're little kids, and we have a localized community and our family, and we have a limited scope. But as we grow up and we read the papers and we watch the news, and we expand our scope to the whole world, and we begin to see this diversity. And you talk about Buddhism, if you think of the school of Nagarjuna or something like that, even logic goes away. And so you can't even begin to have a dialogue with propositional logic in that school of thought. So how do you deal with it's light years different from Christianity? How do you deal with that? In other words, there's more diversity than you can imagine among the religions of the world, and yet we have our own understanding of like it says in Acts 17, that we all are one one origin as human beings, and which is valid either scientifically or in terms of Genesis of Adam. Either way, we have this common origin. But I think the spectrum that you showed is so useful, helpful framework to talk about that whole range of ideas, because we had our Christian philosopher here, Roy Clauser, who wrote a thick book called The Myth of Religious Neutrality, where he makes that point, that the idea that we all basically boil down to one kind of God or one religion, or we can ignore religion and just deal with everything in terms of our common moral principles or something. Those ideas just are myths. They're not really true in the real world. So Clauser will be coming back here later in the fall to give another talk, and so I hope you all will come for that. So yes, I'm going to want to tap into your resources further as we go deeper. This is not a kind of issue that's going to go away. It's getting more and more important as people interact and the world gets more crowded and we're closer to each other, right? And so it's very important for us to deal with much more deeply. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's just close in prayer briefly.